Right now, there are 8 billion of us. We are everywhere. Every continent, every climate, every corner of this planet. But 70,000 years ago, that number collapsed, not to a million, not to 100,000, to somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 human beings, total, on the entire planet. For context, that's less than the capacity of a small concert venue. That's it. That's all that was left of us. And almost none of them knew the others existed. This is the story of the single worst moment in human history. The moment we nearly didn't make it. And the tiny, fragile chain of survivors that every person alive today descends from. Scientists call it the Toba Catastrophe. Around 70,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra in present-day Indonesia, a supervolcano erupted. Not a regular eruption. Not the kind that makes the news for a week. This was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. Mount Toba ejected roughly 2,800 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the atmosphere. To understand that scale, the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980, which killed 57 people and flattened entire forests, ejected about 1 cubic kilometer. Toba was 2,800 times larger. The ash cloud spread across South Asia, the Middle East, and East Africa within days. Then something worse happened. The ash didn't just cover the ground. It entered the upper atmosphere and stayed there. Sulfur particles from the eruption reflected sunlight back into space. Global temperatures dropped by an estimated 3 to 5 degrees Celsius almost overnight. In geological terms, that doesn't sound like much. But consider this. The difference between today's climate and the last ice age is only about 6 degrees. Toba pushed the planet halfway into an ice age in what may have been just a few years. Forests died. Plants stopped growing. Animals that depended on those plants disappeared. The food chain, the entire system keeping humans alive, began collapsing from the bottom up. For our ancestors living in small, scattered groups across Africa, this was not an abstract climate event. This was their food vanishing, their water sources drying or freezing, their world going dark and cold in a way no human had ever experienced. And they had no way to understand why. Where it gets scientifically disturbing. In the 1990s, geneticists began noticing something strange in human DNA. When they mapped the genetic diversity of our species and compared it to other great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, they found something that made no sense. Humans have far less genetic diversity than we should. Chimpanzees, despite having a much smaller total population, carry significantly more genetic variation than 8 billion humans do. There is only one explanation for this. At some point in our past, the human population went through what geneticists call a bottleneck, a catastrophic reduction, so severe, so sudden, that almost all genetic variation was wiped out. The survivors were so few and so isolated that all 8 billion of us today descend from essentially the same tiny group. We are all, genetically speaking, extraordinarily close cousins. The Toba eruption fits the timeline of that bottleneck almost. Who made it? The leading theory points to a small population of early humans living along the southern coast of Africa, near what is now South Africa and Mozambique. This coastline had something critical that most of the planet no longer had after Toba. Food, specifically shellfish. Shellfish don't depend on sunlight the way land plants do. The ocean continued producing, and these early humans, possibly already skilled at coastal foraging, had access to a food source that didn't collapse with the rest of the ecosystem. Archaeologists have found evidence of shellfish consumption in caves along this coastline dating to exactly this period. Blombo's Cave, Pinnacle Point, sites where early humans left behind the remnants of thousands of meals. They didn't survive because they were smarter. They didn't survive because they were stronger. They survived because of where they happened to be standing when the world ended. Geography saved the human race. Now here's the part that changes how you see everything. Every language spoken on Earth today traces back to that group. Every religion, every empire, every scientific discovery, every war, every song ever written. All of it flows from a few hundred or few thousand people huddled on a coastline in southern Africa, eating shellfish in the dark, waiting for a world they couldn't see to become survivable again. But there's something even stranger hiding in that story. The Toba bottleneck didn't just nearly kill us. Some researchers believe it accelerated us. When the population collapsed that severely, only the most adaptable, most cooperative, most creative individuals survived. The volcanic winter may have acted as the most brutal selection filter in human history. The humans who came out the other side were not the same as the ones who went in. They were more socially bonded, more innovative, more capable of abstract thought. Some anthropologists call the explosion of art, tools, language, and symbolic thinking that followed the Toba event the Great Leap Forward. The near extinction didn't just preserve humanity. It may have upgraded it. You exist because of an almost impossibly unlikely chain of events. A supervolcano erupted. The world went dark. Nearly everyone died. And somewhere on a cold African coastline, a small group of people kept eating, kept surviving, kept each other alive long enough for the ash to settle and the sun to come back. Every single person you have ever met, every human being alive today, is a descendant of that group. We didn't just survive the worst thing that ever happened to our species. We came out of it fundamentally different. The near extinction is why we're here. And the next time the world feels like it's falling apart, remember that it literally already did once. And somebody made it through.